Hello and welcome to Writers of the Watershed, a podcast dedicated to promoting regional authorship in the Western Pennsylvania wilds. I'm Jess Weibel, an editor for our literary magazine, the Watershed Journal. Today I'm here with Deb Sarbin, who is a writer and professor of English at Clarion University. Hello and welcome to Writers of the Watershed, a podcast dedicated to promoting regional authorship in the Western Pennsylvania wilds. I'm Jess Weibel, an editor for our literary magazine, the Watershed Journal. Today I'm here with Deb Sarbin, who is a writer and professor of English at Clarion University. Deb has been published in several editions of the Watershed Journal, including the recent fall edition, the Bridge Literary Arts Journal as well, and the Tiny Seed Journal, which is an online blog for writers. So thank you for being here, Deb. So excited to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'd like to start by having you read your poem from the recent fall edition.
Right. It is Haiku in Autumn, a series of 4 haiku. Malign harbingers of spring, dandelions startle in autumn's gold chill. Nutmeg, cinnamon, roll call of exotic spice, pumpkin companions. Crisp as empire apples, fall's morning snap us to fresh attention. Fresh coffee scalding us to life as we stare out our frosted windows.
Thank you so much. I'm such a fan of your poetry, and I want to start by asking you, what are some of your earliest memories with writing?
Oh my goodness. Second grade, when the first creative writing assignment we had was we received a piece of big lined paper with a photograph on it, and mine was a plane in snow. Actually, I want to tell you how many years later, about 50 years later, I remember this. It was on green paper, and we had to write a little story about it, and I got really enthusiastic feedback from my teacher, and I think I saw myself as a writer from that point on.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that you remember vividly, like it was an ekphrastic kind of thing, and you remember the picture. Do you remember anything about what you wrote?
No, not at all.
Oh, it's too bad. You probably didn't keep that piece either. But are there pieces that you've kept from early on, or not really?
No, I've pretty much tried to destroy all of that. Yeah.
I highly relate to that.
Believe me, and I think that I do not, there's the published copy. I don't even have a copy of my dissertation.
Wow.
Never want to look at it again.
But I love that you had an identity wrapped around that early on based on what you were hearing from your teachers and that response, and publishing your work does that for you.
Yes. Yeah.
So in the poem that you just read, or the series of poems, it's Haiku in Autumn. It has 4 sets of haiku that really complement one another beautifully. So what is it that you appreciate about the haiku form and decided to employ it with this submission?
Well, certainly its brevity is appealing. I was writing, of course, the deadline for Watershed was right at a crunch time in our semester, and I knew that I wanted to write something. It was the 10th edition, and that's really a significant thing, the 10th issue, and really a significant thing, and I thought, I want to be part of that. So it was a quick form to write, but it is also so image driven, and I really tried to get that. I tried to get some of the surprise and tactile experiences of the fall season, which I love. It's a wonderful season. I think it's a wonderful kind of iconic Western Pennsylvania season. And so haiku is really great for that, for really putting the emphasis on the sense experience.
And I love the image that our managing editor, Sarah Rossi, paired with your poem. Yeah, did you like that?
Oh my gosh. And I'm just so lucky to get a Greg Clary photograph for one
Yeah,
thing. So it's
right.
so wonderful. And yes, yeah, beautiful. And just picking up on the apples and
Mhm.
the notion of like an apple crisp. But oh yeah,
Yeah, there's really an
that
aspect
was
of
really good of Sarah.
yeah, there's really an aspect of like serendipity when it comes to matching whatever kind of submissions we get in photography or visual arts wise, and then with the poems, I think if we would have tried to plan it, it would have come out much worse.
Yes, yeah, it's true. I've seen that serendipity
Mm.
over the years. Wonderful, wonderful photos that have fit perfectly.
Hmm. I love the lines "crisp as empire" and "pumpkin companions," and this is something that I've really noticed about your work is that you have the language is always fresh and innovative and highly visual and sensory. So how do you keep things, how do you keep the language fresh and interesting and kind of challenge yourself to be innovative with it?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, well, I know when I started seriously writing poetry really a few years ago, when I really dedicated myself to writing poetry, I knew that I wanted my poetry to be very concrete and very much embedded in the world. And so I really do try to keep alive to my sensory experiences. If I'm out taking a walk, I'm always registering and I'm trying to very purposely register what are the scents, what am I smelling, what am I hearing, and really being aware. So it's cultivating that awareness. And, then I might scribble something down in a notebook. Um, and so that, I think just keeping it there, keeping that commitment to the image as just part of my practice, part of something I cultivate. And as far as language, I don't know. I just read lots of poetry, lots of wonderful poetry, and I just love words
Mm.
and playing with words, and I love puns and sounds, and so yeah.
When you are looking for inspiration, when you're looking to tap into maybe things are getting busy or you're kind of getting wrapped up in what happened before or what's going to happen next, are there poets that you turn to that help you tap into that level of awareness and remind you how to do that?
Probably the ultimate poet of that for me is Seamus Heaney, the great Irish poet. Um, his poems just always amaze me, and I can read them. Some I'll encounter for the first time. Others I've read many times, and yet every time, and he really has that sense of playfulness with language and such a groundedness in his location. Um, he's a wonderful idea. One could aspire to that.
Mm.
But yeah, he is a wonderful model for that.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that he's definitely one of my go-to poets. And for playfulness, I love Terrence Hayes. I tell
Mm.
everybody who who wants my poetical opinion, that he really is our greatest contemporary poet.
Mm.
He is it. Yeah. And it is he deals with you know, the ultimately serious issues, the life and death issues in our country, but he does it with playfulness and wit. And, he's created new poetic forms like the golden shovel. Just, yeah. So I love reading Hayes' poetry too. Yeah,
Mm. Great.
definitely.
Now, I know that you're also teaching, and that's one of the things that can kind of maybe get in the way of some of taking time for your own writing. Um, how do you feed your own creative pursuits when you are also in a position where you're you're giving, the inspiration, and you're supplying motivation and validation constantly to young writers, and maybe even reluctant young writers. So how do you make sure that you are kind of doing that good writerly self-care?
Mm. And well, I think a lot of that comes down to my writing communities. So that's Watershed, the fact that you have regular meetings. So there can always be that commitment. At least once a month, I can know that I'm going to have an encounter with other writers, or I might be able to write something for a meeting prompt. And then I've worked also with the Bridge Literary Group in Franklin under Phil Terman. And again, it's a pretty regular commitment. Mm-hmm. And then most continuous is my involvement in a Renshi poetry group online. And that is, pretty, I think it turns out to be about every 6 week commitment. But, just also the commitment of reading everyone else's work. And that just, it's a thread throughout the year. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's absolutely my writing communities that give me my writerly self-care. I like that phrase.
Good. And so you talked a little bit about, your favorite poets, and talked a little bit about your experience when you were a student and were first feeling that sense of, oh, I'm a writer. This is something that I can identify with. What would you say would be the best piece of writing advice that you've gotten? And alternatively, what would be the advice that you would give to writers who are maybe, not feeling validated, not feeling inspired, not feeling like there's a readership for their work?
Okay.
There's a lot in that question.
Yes,
Sorry.
Yeah. We're thinking about. Okay. Okay. So best advice that I've been given. And that's kind of hard because the advice, can come from a lot of different places, can come from things I've read as well as from individuals. But I'll tell you, I think the advice that I like to give to student writers, and usually I'm teaching expository writing, and in that academic writing, writing that students need to do for the rest of their academic careers, which is its own individual beast, academic writing. But something that I have found that students have told me they really appreciate the feedback, is that I really encourage them to work through a process of writing. So rather than the last minute, and I went through this phase when I was an undergrad, like, I have to write under pressure. I need to be under that boiler pressure to be able to produce something. And that's the worst thing you could do as a writer. It's the worst thing any writer can do. And so, since I got beyond that, I always share that with students. And I've recently found a way of phrasing it that I think really has hit students, at least the feedback they gave me, that when they're procrastinating, that's really an expression of fear. Because I myself have dealt with being a procrastinator and waiting, and I've come to realize that it's a sort of perfectionist fear. Because a perfectionist wants to have it perfect and exact. And, you almost have a get out of jail free card. It's like, well, that was just a last minute thing. I just did it at the last minute. So, I think procrastination really comes from this sort of place of fear of being judged. And if writers can just let that go, it's just about the writing. It's just about producing the writing. and not worrying about the judgment that's going to happen. It's just produce the writing, be there for the writing and that process of discovery. And that's the value in writing, not getting hung up on how it's going to be received or judged.
I love that. Great advice. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview and talking. I've been looking forward to interviewing you and hearing more about your process and your experiences. So this was great.
Well, thanks. Thank you so much, Jess, for the opportunity.